So it's good to be back. For those of you who were here last week, I see some familiar faces out there. I hope you'll forgive me if I have forgotten your name. To tell you the truth, I'm just not great with names. I know Lee, and you're about the only one I remember. It reminds me of a story. I've got a friend named Mike, and Mike used to work for a Christian organization, a conference-based organization. Mike was an advance man. His job was to travel ahead to cities to promote conferences before they got there. He did a lot of radio interviews. He was a busy guy. Mike was always running late. So he showed up in one city, and he's late for a live radio interview. This one's live. So when he gets to the station, it's too late. The interview has started. The interviewer has had to actually begin the interview without Mike there. So they hustle Mike into the studio, and as they hustle him in and he takes his seat quietly, Mike suddenly realizes, oh no, I forgot this guy's name. Now, he thinks the guy's name is Bob, but he's not sure. Do you take a chance on that? How embarrassing to call the guy by the wrong name, right? Now, to make it even worse, this guy is extremely friendly, extremely personal, and he's dropping Mike's name right and left. Well, Mike, welcome. It's so good to have you, Mike. Great to see you again, Mike. And all Mike can say is, hey, you, right? So as the interview is going on, Mike is desperately looking around the studio for some kind of a diploma, some kind of certificate of recognition that says Bob, something that will confirm the name, but there's nothing. There's no clue. And suddenly it occurs to Mike, wait a minute, this is radio, not television. Nobody can see me. So while they're talking, Mike takes out a sheet of paper, and in big letters, he writes Bob with a question mark by it, and he holds it up to the interviewer. The interviewer glances down at the sheet, and he pauses, and then he goes, oh, I'm sorry, Bob. Here I've been calling you Mike this whole time. So if you forget my name, just call me Bob, okay? We all have a problem with names. Well, if you were here with us last week, I showed you a passage from Philippians chapter 4. In fact, we'll put it on the screen here. It says, finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute. If there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. And in the verse that follows, it tells you that if you'll do that, the God of peace will be with you. And last week, we talked about the fact that we're living in an epidemic of anxiety, worry, and fear among Christian people. And what we said last week is, you're not responsible for your awareness. You're not in control of every thought that crosses your mind, but you are in control of your focus. You can choose what you will dwell on. And if you're not experiencing peace, the Apostle Paul would say, where's your mind? What are you choosing to dwell on? Because if you'll dwell on these things, you can experience peace. Part of peace is up to you. Well, this week I'm talking about something similar. My father, I grew up in St. Louis, by the way. My dad was not a Christian. In fact, my dad called himself an atheist. He never really explained why, but I think part of it was because during a time when he was young, he was raised for a while by his grandfather, and his grandfather was actually a minister. But his grandfather's approach to Christianity was very much a thou shalt not approach. Highly disciplinarian, highly restrictive. And Dad said that he could remember endless Sundays where all he was allowed to do was sit on the front porch in a chair with his hands folded in his lap. That's what it was to be a good Christian. I didn't become a Christian until I was in college. So I can remember when I was in high school and it was Friday night and I was going out on a date, and my parents would say to me, don't smoke, don't drink, and don't fool around. Have fun. And I would think, how am I supposed to have fun? You just crossed all the fun stuff off the list. The truth is, it's really hard to have a fun evening made up of things you don't do. It's even harder to have a fulfilling life made up of things that you don't do. It's a funny thing, but this is a danger for us as Christians. Because from the time we're very young, we are taught the things that we should not do. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. The problem for us is sometimes our entire faith becomes defined in terms of the things that we avoid. and the things that we don't do. And it's really hard to have a fulfilling and meaningful life made up of things that you don't do. This goes so far for Christians that our image, our stereotype of heaven, of existing in the presence of God, is that you get to wear a white robe and sit on a puffy little cloud playing a harp forever and ever. How does that sound to you? If it sounds a bit boring, well, it should. Because a faith defined only in terms of what you don't do becomes passive and boring. And I think one of the greatest dangers that we face as Christians is boredom. We know what not to do, but we don't know what to do. So I'm glad you're here at church this morning. What are you supposed to do the other 6.5 days of the week? Just fold your hands and sit in a chair and not commit sin? That sounds like fun. What is a Christian to do? I've written 13 books, so I'm very aware of book concepts. The truth is, when it comes to publishing, it's all been said before. To be a successful writer, you need a good concept. You need a new, fresh, creative package for things that have probably already been said. So I want to show you a book concept that I thought was genius. This book came out in 2008, and you've probably heard of it before. Eat this, not that. And the moment I saw it, I said, that's genius. You know what makes this so brilliant? It's a diet book. And diet books are depressing because diet books are all about thou shalt not. Thou shalt not eat that, and thou shalt not eat that. And are you enjoying that? We'll cut that out too. They took a different approach. The approach of this book is, do you feel like having a Big Mac? Okay, that's fine. But instead of the Big Mac, have this. Eat this instead. It's what a psychologist would call replacement theory. And did you notice they don't begin with, don't eat that, eat this. No, they even begin on a positive note. Eat this. Because we all enjoy eating. Just eat this instead of that. The interesting thing is the Apostle Paul took the same approach to what we should be doing day by day in our Christian life. And I want to show you the passage. It comes from 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 22. Paul said, now, flee from youthful lusts and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. Now, the beginning of his instruction is flee. Flee from youthful lust. That's all he has to say about it. It's almost a throwaway line. And it's kind of reminiscent of that story from the Old Testament about Joseph. Remember the story? Joseph is a young Jewish man. He's been betrayed by his brothers, sold into bondage in Egypt, finds himself working in the household of an Egyptian higher up, a guy named Potiphar. And Potiphar has a wife. And Joseph spends a lot of time at home there with Potiphar's wife. Joseph is, well, he's hot. There's no other word for it, I guess. He's hot. He's a good-looking young man. Potiphar's wife is kind of that stereotypical lonely housewife, right? So we're told that one day when they're alone, Potiphar's wife grabs Joseph by his outer garment and says to him, come lie with me. It's a subtle approach, right? So what does Joseph do? Well, what he does is he twists out of his outer garment and he goes running out into the desert wearing nothing but his fruit of the Niles. It's an embarrassing story. It's not a very heroic story, but it's a story of a smart man. See, an American hero story would have had him knock her hands away, spit in her eye, and say, unhand me, woman, and then ride off into the desert on his horse. So is that your approach to temptation? Is that your approach to lust? You know, lust is a desire gone mad. And is your approach to temptation to stand in the face of it and look it in the eye and resist? How's that working for you? Have you noticed that like all human beings, you have an unbelievable, almost limitless capacity to rationalize and give in? So the Apostle Paul says to us, remember Joseph. Yes, not a hero story. It's a smart guy story. He wasn't going to stand in the face of temptation. He ran away. And we should too. So remember those desires gone mad from your youth, things that you've learned by now are self-destructive, that hurt other people, and even messed up your relationship with your Creator. Paul said, run away. Get away from that stuff. What are you doing? Just flee from youthful lust. 4 words, flee from youthful lust, and he's done with it. So there you are, you're on the run. What are you supposed to be running toward? Well, Paul says run away from those desires gone mad, but be in pursuit of 4 things. Now, you know what it means to pursue something because we use the word. I pursued a degree. I pursued a career. To pursue something is more than to run. To pursue something, that's an active chase. It takes conscious effort. It takes planning and organization because you are in pursuit of something. You're going to chase it down. And Paul says that's what you want to do. Not just run, but be in pursuit of these 4 things, and this should make up the bulk of your Christian life. These should be the things that we are about for 6.5 days a week. So first of all, he says, pursue righteousness. You know, we tend to take a very passive approach to righteousness. Because we grow up learning thou shalt not, we think that if I can just sit here and avoid the big sins, what's left over is righteousness. No, if you can just avoid the big sins, what's left over is you sitting on the sofa doing nothing. Righteousness is an actual thing. It's a goal, and it's something that if you want to obtain it, you have to pursue it. I watched a documentary recently on the life of Benjamin Franklin. Franklin was a fascinating guy, a truly brilliant man. And when he lived, he was the most famous American in the world. For a time, he was the most popular author in the world. He was a statesman. He was a diplomat, ambassador to France, an incredibly accomplished guy. He was not a Christian by his own admission. Franklin was what we would call a deist, very popular in his day. A deist is somebody that believes there's some kind of creator God out there somewhere, but he's kind of like a cosmic clockmaker. Created the world, wound it up, then let it go to run on its own. But he's not involved. He doesn't get involved in the world. That's all up to us. The interesting thing about Franklin is, even though he wasn't a Christian, he was very big on self-improvement. He wanted to improve his virtue. So when he wrote his autobiography, which for quite a while was the most popular book in the world, apart from the Bible, what Franklin said in his autobiography is he made a list of all the virtues: honesty, integrity, patience, and then what he would do is take one of them every month. Honesty. This month is honesty month. And that would become his grid, his lens, his filter that he would see everything through for the entire month. He would ask himself, what would an honest person do? What would the honest thing be for me to say? And at the end of every day, in his journal, he actually graded himself. How honest was I today? Where did I fail to be honest? How could I be more honest tomorrow? Boy, you got to admit, the guy was in pursuit of virtue. It didn't work out very well for him. He was a fairly immoral man, but he at least treated virtue as something that could be pursued instead of something that passively happened to him. Now, if you're a Christian, what you're thinking right now is, now wait a minute. I've always heard that our righteousness is something that comes to us from God. It is given to us because of what Christ did for us on the cross. He lived the perfect life. And because of my faith in him, his righteousness is given to me. It's the exchanged life. A theologian would say, his righteousness is imputed to me. Yes, that is positionally true. But when it comes to your actual experience of righteousness, then you play a role. Because Paul tells us righteousness is something that you have to actually be in pursuit of. You don't sit around and wait for it to happen to you. You go after it. If you are a Christian, the Spirit of God dwells inside you. You have the power of God to enable you to do all kinds of good and wonderful things, but not while you're sitting on the sofa with your hands folded. I love the old African proverb that says, while you pray, move your feet. Praying and doing, they're not mutually exclusive. They're companions, and they should be for us. The righteousness of Christ is imputed to you, and then Paul says, go chase it down. Make that righteousness a part of your experience. Employ the power of God within you to be a righteous person and to do good. So ask yourself some questions. Can you think of a wrong that needs to be righted? Is that something you could pursue? Do you have a habit that needs to be broken? Are you just waiting around for God to do that? Or is there something you can do? Is there a discipline that needs to be started in your life? Is there a debt that needs to be repaid? And I'm not just talking about money here. I'm talking about personal obligations, personal debts. All those things are forms of righteousness. But to experience them, you'll have to pursue them. And with the power of God, you can do that. And Paul says, 6.5 days a week, that's what you want to be about doing. Now, second on his list, he says, pursue faith. I remember as a younger Christian, I was wearing a t-shirt one day. The t-shirt had a quotation from 1 Timothy 6:12. It said, fight the good fight of faith. I was at the gym wearing that t-shirt one day, and a guy walked up to me and pointed to my shirt and said, that's a little combative, don't you think? And it kind of stopped me in my tracks. I had to stop and think, what does that sound like to him? And it suddenly occurred to me that what he thought it said was, I have a faith and I'm willing to fight with you about it. But that's not what it means. It means you have a faith, but you will fight to keep that faith a vibrant and living faith. You have to pursue faith. It's a gift from God, but to really experience it, you're going to have to go after it. There's a trend today that's growing. We all know about this. We've got kids that grow up in good churches like this. They grow up under the teaching of great guys like Rod. But then they go off to college and they give up their faith. They lose their faith. And we all shake our heads and wonder, why is this happening? Well, I'm going to give you a verse that might clear it up a little bit. This is a clue that comes from the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 18:17. The first to plead his case seems right until another comes and examines him. See the application? When it comes to raising kids, bringing them up the right way, teaching them about the faith, bringing them to church, you are the first to plead your case. Then they go off to college, and now there's a professor who's an atheist or a skeptic, maybe outwardly hostile towards Christianity, and they don't look evil. In fact, it's an attractive person, very intelligent and very highly educated. They come along and they examine him. And sometimes our kids feel like, I've been cheated. I've been lied to. I've been deceived. And that's it. I'm done. And they blow off their faith. You know, we all have doubts. We all have questions about our faith. Where did the Bible come from? Who wrote it and how do we know? And how do we know it's reliable? How is it transmitted and passed on? We all have our doubts and we all have our questions. And you know, Jesus never discouraged doubt. The Bible's not down on doubt. The Bible's down on cynicism. It's not down on doubters, it's down on scoffers. You know the difference? Doubt says, I don't understand. What's the answer? Cynicism says, I don't understand and don't bother me with any answers. It's all silly. It's all stupid. See, the problem with cynicism is it's incurable because it won't wait around for an answer. But do you remember the story of doubting Thomas? It's the resurrection of Jesus. And the disciples tell Thomas, he's risen. Thomas says, I'm not believing that. That's crazy. And it was crazy, wasn't it? That's crazy. He says, I'm not going to believe it unless I see him myself, unless I can put my finger in the wounds in his hands and stick my hand into the wound in his side. And right at that awkward moment, Jesus appears. And what he says to Thomas is, go ahead. Put your finger in the wounds of my hands, stick your hand in the wound of my side. And then he says, don't be unbelieving, be believing. But Jesus never shames him for his question or his honest doubt, right? Doubting Thomas is a name that doesn't appear in the Bible. It's just Thomas. And we should call him Honest Thomas. The problem sometimes in our churches is we create an atmosphere of politeness. don't ask that question. What are people going to think about you? How small is your faith anyway? And you could damage somebody else's faith by even bringing that up. And the problem when we take that approach, especially with our young people, when we don't encourage open and honest doubting questions, is doubt becomes a cancer that erodes your faith. It silently, in the dark, eats away at your faith until your faith is just something small and weak. So ask yourself this. Is there a question that's been bothering you? Something that really nags at you? Something that's diminished your faith, but out of politeness or maybe shame, you haven't brought it up? Is there a doubt that you have left unspoken because you didn't know where to go with it? Has somebody asked you a question that you couldn't answer and it's been nagging at you ever since? You know, your message that came from Rod Cheney today, he's at Gordon Conwell. Your pastor has a graduate degree in the study of the Bible. It would be very hard for you to ask him a question he's never heard before. And if he can't answer your question, he can point you to some great resources that really can. The only impossible question is the question that's never asked. And we have to encourage our young kids to ask the hard questions and get those answers so that when they go away to college or service, they're not being examined or tested for the very first time. We have to pursue faith if we don't want our faith to be eroded by doubt. Then third on the list, Paul says we need to pursue love. Now, whenever a Christian talks about love, we always go to the same passage, and that's 1 Corinthians 13, right? You probably have it all but memorized. Here it is on the screen. We recite this at all of our weddings, don't we? Love is patient. You should really say it this way. Love is kind and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant. You know, we love to recite this. You know why? Because it sounds like poetry. Have you ever noticed that even people who are not Christians will have this read at their weddings? It's love in the abstract. So it's inspirational. There's nothing for me to do. You know, this verse, it doesn't become annoying until you start looking closer and realize there's a list of verbs in there, things that you're actually supposed to do. It has words like bears, believes, hopes, endures, and never fails. And I think we ought to read this at our weddings, but I think we should present it in a different way. What I'd like to see people do is convert this passage into a list of character qualities. In fact, I'll show you my list. This comes right from 1 Corinthians 13. So here you are today, and you're to be married. You're here with your fiance. I am the minister marrying to you, and you're standing in front of me. So here's what I'm about to say to you. All right, you all know 1 Corinthians 13. I'm going to show it to you as a list of character qualities. I'm going to go through them one at a time. You want that marriage of yours to thrive or even survive? You better do this. And I want you to rank yourself 1 to 10 on each of these words as we go through them. You ready? First of all, are you going to be patient? You promise to do that? He's going to leave his socks on the floor 5,000 times. What are you going to do on the 5,000th time? You going to be patient? Will you be kind in all of your interactions? Or will you do what a lot of couples do and get rude and blunt over time? Will you be trusting, or are you going to be jealous and paranoid? Will you erode trust through suspicion and become a controlling person? Can you be humble? Can you actually take the approach of me second and you first? Can you be gracious? When you speak the truth, will you speak the truth in love? Or are you going to pride yourself on being an honest guy while you're being a cruel guy? What about slow to anger? Are you easily triggered? Good luck to your marriage if you are. What about carrying a grudge? Because I guarantee you, you'll never forget the wrongs done against you. Are you going to bring them up and recite them to your spouse? Good luck if you do. Will you be honest and loving at the same time? Can you be sacrificing a genuine attitude of, you eat first, then I eat. You go first, then I go. And will you absolutely refuse to quit? Now, how many people would recite this at their wedding if it was presented that way? But Paul would say that's what love is. We love the word love today because it's an empty box we can fill up with anything we want. We think of love almost exclusively as an emotion. Love is a warm puppy. And so we complain all the time. I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling the love. If you said to the Apostle Paul, I'm not feeling the love, I think the Apostle Paul would say, that's interesting. Are you doing the love? Because the feelings of love tend to follow the actions of love. Are you doing the love? For you married couples, let me say something that I think you already know. Marriage is the art of consistently loving someone you don't always like. In fact, I'll broaden that. Human life is the art of consistently loving people you don't always like. And in a way, isn't that what God does? He certainly doesn't always approve of the things we say and do, but he never fails to love us, and he expects us to pursue love in the same way for other people. Finally, on your list, Paul says, pursue peace. Now, I've written 9 murder mysteries. That's what I do in my spare time. How about you? I wrote a book several years ago called Plague Maker. I won't go into all the details of it, but it's set originally in World War II. It's about 2 men, now very old, still alive, were active in World War II. Both of them lost someone precious to them. They suffered greatly through the loss of someone they loved in the Second World War. But in my book, I tell the story of 2 men who take different paths in their lives. One man takes the path of anger and bitterness and revenge, and another man takes the path of seeking forgiveness. And I'm trying to play out the difference it makes in a soul, whether you take one path or the other. Now, the interesting thing is, my book is just less than 400 pages long, but my whole book was inspired by a little bitty passage that you can find in Matthew chapter 5. And I'll show it to you. Jesus is speaking here. He said, therefore, if you are presenting your offering at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother, then come and present your offering. Now, you've read this before. Our problem is we read over it too quickly. We're not reading it like first century Jews. See, Jesus was talking about the annual trek someone might make to Jerusalem, to the altar in the temple, to make an annual sacrificial offering. In those days, if you went to make an offering at the temple in Jerusalem, if you weren't from Jerusalem, then doing that offering required pilgrimage. It cost money, it took planning and time, and it could be dangerous to do. You could get robbed along the way. So that's the context that Jewish listeners heard Jesus' words in. Jesus was saying to them, if you go on your pilgrimage and you've done all that planning and you've spent all that money and you faced all those dangers and finally you make it to the temple and you've worked your way through the crowd and now you've come to the altar with your offering, the consummate event to wrap up the end of all of this, at that moment, if you remember that your brother has something against you, drop it. Leave your offering and go be reconciled to your brother. How much more emphasis could he give it? So, modern Americans, think about it this way. You plan a once-in-a-lifetime trip for your family to Disney World. And you've got your flights all booked, and you got the rent-a-car at the other end, and you got a great place to stay in the Disney Village. And finally, you make that trip, and what a day it is. And you've worked your way through the crowd and the endless ticket line, and finally you're at the gate. You're about to step onto the monorail. And right then, you remember that your brother has something against you. Would you drop everything and leave it right there and go be reconciled to your brother and then come back? Because that's basically what Jesus said to do. How far would you go to pursue peace? It's the question that I wrote about for 400 pages. Would an elderly man, terribly hurt in World War II, would he spend decades of his life, would he commit the rest of his life to seeking forgiveness? Is that so crazy to do? What happens to a soul that pursues peace in that way? How far will you go to pursue peace? So ask yourself, is there an apology that you need to offer? You got a good rationalization for not doing it, but is it there? Is it nagging at you? Is there a relationship that you need to mend? Or is there somebody that you just need to reach out to because you think there might be a misunderstanding, some coldness or anger between you? Will you refuse to trade insult for insult, but give a blessing instead, as the Bible tells us to do? And when you're reading that blog post that makes you so mad because they are so wrong, are you going to add to the comment section? Are you going to add to the anger, the viciousness, the vitriol that's out there? Or will you discipline yourself to say it politely or not say it at all? Will you refuse to add to the anger and coldness and partisan everything that's out there today? Will you pursue peace? Paul said, run away from desires gone mad. You know it's self-destructive. You know it hurts other people. You know it messes up your relationship with God. Run away from that. But instead, make an active, conscious, planned, organized pursuit of righteousness, faith, love, and peace. That's what a Christian is to do. And I'll show you the verse one more time. And we've added an underline to the last section because he closes with this. While you're pursuing those things, do it with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. You know, the pursuit of righteousness, faith, love, and peace can be a pretty lonely pursuit because there's not a lot of competition. And you can feel lonely doing it all by your lonesome. So what Paul is saying is, this is where other people come in. This is what church is all about. And this is where spouses and friends, partners come in. Who can I team up with? Somebody who's in the same pursuit that I am. They're interested in virtue. They're interested in righteousness and in building their faith, in growing in love and pursuing peace at all costs. Who can I kind of team up with? Somebody sincere, somebody that has no ulterior motive, somebody that can encourage me when I'm down, kick me in the fanny when I'm lazy, get me up and going again. Who can I team up with that'll make it easier to do this? If you're trying to raise your kids as Christian kids, it can feel kind of lonely out there. You know any other couples trying to do the same thing? Get to know them better. You in school? You young? Who are your friends? Who are your closest friends? Are they people who can lift and build and encourage and challenge you, or people who let you slide? Because you can't be sitting around with your hands folded in your lap. You've been granted righteousness and you've been given faith by God. But now God says to you, experience those things. My Spirit lives within you and will empower you. I have given you a spirit of power, love, and discipline. Now live it out and experience what's been granted to you. Be righteous. Be faithful. Be loving. Be peaceful. And just like the peace that we talked about last week, a part of this is up to us. Don't let your Christian faith be defined just in terms of what you avoid. That's kind of boring. Let your Christian faith be active and about things you're chasing down and making a part of your daily experience. So this week, as you go out of here, turn your faith around to an active pursuit and ask yourself, how can I go after righteousness, faith, love, and peace? And who else can I do it with? Let's close in prayer, okay? Father, we are grateful to you that you have granted your righteousness to us and extended forgiveness. We're grateful that you are in Christ reconciling the world to yourself. And Lord, if your Spirit lives within us, we pray that you will empower us to pursue the things that you say are worthwhile. So this week, we're praying, help us to be in the pursuit of righteousness, faith, love, and peace, and help us to identify others who are doing the same. We love you, and we pray in Christ's name. Amen. Thanks, guys.